All right, first day at Concrete Club. We're here with Harrison, the president, and he's explaining us, all about the Concrete Club. All right, so keep going.
So kind of what we got here, this is a special type of rock. We're starting off with, this is special application, but lightweight aggregate from a volcanic rock. And so this stuff, if you get the coarse aggregate and the sand aggregate both in lightweight volcanic form, volcanic rock and volcanic sand, you're talking about like 30% weight reduction. So kind of a cool thing. It also is porous, and so the cement paste will bond to the rock better, and so you get an increase in strength. Strength is kind of what would you call it? A function of, I'm not saying that right. It's based on, a lot of your strength is based on the bond strength of the cement paste to the rock or to the sand. And so kind of a cool thing there. So that was donated.
Yeah, you said
fun
from
stuff. From Lehigh Harrison. Shout out to Lehigh. I believe Lehigh. I think it was Lehigh. One of these guys out here. So over here, typically you have like flat work. When you think of concrete, you think of like flat work, sidewalks, pavement, stuff like that. Right here we have vertical concrete, and it's not just vertical concrete. It's not a vertical mortar, kind of like a stucco. If you think of like your typical vertical mortar type thing that's stucco. This is like that. However, it's much thicker in this case because we wanted to carve into it. We wanted to stamp texture into this. And so this is just one of the possibilities with stamped concrete, where it's wherever your mind leads you, really, to whatever you want to carve, whatever shapes. If you want to carve wooden planks and stamp, if you have a textured roller that has a wooden grain texture on it, go ahead, go right ahead. Look it up online. People do crazy stuff. People do very, very creative things with concrete, which is kind of an oxymoron or whatever you call that. It's like kind of like the opposite of what you think. Warehouse floors is like typically your concrete. That comes to mind, at least for me it did. I didn't think of any of this. If you come in here.
This is concrete too?
This is concrete in here.
Even the brick?
Yeah, the brick, yeah. So this was
wow. Jeez.
Different technique. So this was like a stencil. So you pour your concrete flat, right? It looks like just like it would for a sidewalk. They trout it out, it's smooth. Now, they put a plastic grid pattern stencil and you trowel that into the surface. And so now you have parts of the concrete that are covered up and troweled into the concrete surface, so that you can then sprinkle on your color. And it won't go wherever you have the plastic covering. Obviously, the color wouldn't get on, and it's called a color hardener. And so it actually increases the density and strength of the surface while simultaneously giving you color. So that was one layer of color, troweled in, boom. Then we wanted texture. The texture wasn't there yet. You can see there's texture here. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but there's a nice little texture here. And so if we wanted the texture, it's like, okay, we could stamp into it, but it's wet because we troweled that first color in, and it's kind of, we still have the paste there, it's wet. So stamping the texture in, it'd kind of suction off, and it would lift some of the concrete.
Yes.
So they've come up with a method to facilitate stamping called, through the use of, you could say, a powder release. And it's a powdered color release. So it allows you to stamp, and not just stamp, because it's a powdered color. And so you get a powdered color in the concrete while stamping it and getting a texture at the same time. So now you have two colors and a texture and a brick pattern. 3 and 4 and 1. I don't know how many that is, but it's pretty good. And if you go to the Victorian House on campus, they did just that leading up.
Really?
The front entrance. Yeah.
Wow.
We did that. My decorative concrete class. # go concrete program, associate's degree at Penn College. I'll sell that to everyone because it's an awesome program. I love it. So we learned this stuff, we learned the stamping. Right here, you can't see it, but we're going to polish down an 1/8 inch of the surface, and it's going to expose aggregates all through the surface that we sprinkled in when the concrete was still plastic. Sprinkled in whatever you want. Bottle caps. We did glass. And then we troweled it in, so it brought the paste up and segregated what we sprinkled in. You let it harden up, you come back with like a grinder, surface grinder. Boop, boop, boop. Everything pops out, and now you got a bunch of decorative rock exposed. So that's kind of a cool thing. We'll polish this all down. Different types of polishing. You can get anything as smooth as that, or smoother. You can get it as smooth as glass, some people say.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go all the way to 20,000 grit. I don't really know what happens.
Yeah, whenever I think about concrete,
I've never been there.
you think about like this or kind of the like the gray stuff that's just flat and spans the sidewalk, but
Yeah.
nothing ever like this. It's like you can see the thinness of it, but still like the amount of detail it's in.
Right.
Cool.
It's not what you would expect. It's I've been taking an architectural history class, and they talk about how the Romans would cover up the building material that was the structure, the concrete. They would cover it up, kind of with mosaics or with a mortar, with a mortared stucco, which is basically just a kind of concrete anyway, but it was like a decorative concrete. And nowadays, though, you can literally stamp the texture or the color or the pattern or paint whatever you want into the concrete itself, into the surface itself, and seal that over with a gloss of like an acrylic coating to give you protection. So it's kind of an all-in-one system if you want it to be. Now you can still put layers over it too if you want. So this is another example of vertical concrete. So this was kind of, you take balls of this concrete, this decorative concrete, and you throw it on the wall. Kind of like you're chucking a ball, and then you trowel it in however thick you want it. You could go 3/8. You could go up to that's an inch over here. Back when I was showing you there, depending on how deep you want the mortar joints, for example, or whatever texture you're carving into it. So this was about an inch thick, and we would just take a trowel, just like a steel trowel, and get all what you need there, kind of all the blocks, all the different shapes. Texture would have already been stamped into it, and then you stain it. So
I remember I came here one time. I think it was for a BCT class. They kind of canceled it now, so they don't have that class anymore. But we did like a concrete thing in that lab over there where we had to like, in that huge square, we had to pour like the concrete and then slide a wooden piece to, line it all out. And they kind of explained it to us that even the wood there is concrete, right?
Oh yeah, maybe I should have explained that. Yeah, everything here is concrete. Yep. And so this would have been, I wasn't here when they did this, but I believe they would have texture rolled this. So they would have formed it up at first. And this is all lightweight, by the way. You can kind of feel it. It's lightweight through the use of some kind of foam material that was kind of mixed in, just like you'd mix rock or sand into the concrete. They had foam. And it is cracking, yeah. It is cracking. There's probably a little too much foam, but you can see how it has some give.
Yeah.
Kind of
like even all the way to the
yeah. It's almost kind of still being held together and locked in by probably some kind of fiber in there. So different things you can throw into the concrete. We could go down so many different paths here, but let's stick to the decorative. So if you look down, this is an epoxy floor flake finish. This directly bonds, the substrate is just what you have right over here. It's like a warehouse floor. The epoxy is so, what do you call that? It has such a high bond strength that it just latched to the floor. Now, typically that was because, we didn't do any floor prep. I think typically you are supposed to grind and roughen up the surface a bit before you throw this stuff on, but we just put it right on because we wanted to be able to take it right back off if we wanted, since this lab kind of needs to be adaptable for the students. But yep, so this would have been like they had like a cement mixed with a polymer, epoxy as the polymer, and then you just throw these flakes into it. You mix it up inside like a bucket, and you pour it out. It's self-leveling. You get a gauge rake. It's somewhat self-leveling. You get a gauge rake that is flat, and it has two little things that let it hover above the surface, like little legs, little high heels almost that let it. Of how you can. I poured this upside down, and you can actually. I laid texture mask. Imagine this whole thing's upside down. And on the bottom of the formwork, I laid a bunch of little texture mats that you would use actually for stamping. And I laid them on the inside, on the bottom, and I glued them down. And I poured the concrete over top of it. It's flipped over and then I poured it over top of those mats. And when I stripped the forms the next 3 days later or 7 days later, whatever it was, this is what I got. And it's actually, it's dusty right now, but you get a lot of texture. Look at what the mats can do. And of course we epoxied over it. That's why you have a gloss finish here. And this is our first time using epoxy, so just a pro tip here real quick, you can see there are spots where even if we rinsed it down, it looks a little kind of milky, if you will. And that's because we applied too much epoxy at once, is what I've been told. Is we were applying the epoxy too thick. You're supposed to go in kind of thin layers that kind of follow, the next day you come back, put another layer on the day after that, and just keep going to however thick you want to do it. And each layer is supposed to be like an 1/8 inch at a time or something like that, just to avoid that effect, so that you can get clarity through the whole thickness of the epoxy. At least for the kind we were using. Now there's different kinds of epoxies out there, stuff I surely don't know, so I could definitely be wrong about that, but that's what I've been told. But yeah, there's just an example. That could be like a countertop or like a bathroom sink if you had a hole in the middle here, something like that. And then right here, so this is an example of like one of our stepping stones. This is what we use for fundraisers, like $12 a piece. This probably would be a little more expensive because this is I think a white Portland cement. You can see it has a much lighter color. But we just have molds that are poured, it's poured upside down, precast in precast fashion, if you want to be technical. And depending on your mix design, if you're good at what you do and you consolidate everything the way you're supposed to, you don't over consolidate either, you'll get a material that is free of, for the most part, of any air voids. Now you have a few little pinholes, as they call them, or air voids here and there, but nothing that can't be fixed with a slurry coat, which is just Portland cement with water, maybe some color in there to match what you had. So that's stepping stone. That's a stepping stone. This is kind of a bench that's in the process. It's well, I'm not gonna lie, pretty ugly right now because we're only partway through the staining process. But this would have been an acid stain. Someone either would have sprayed it or painted it on, and it reacts with the. I believe it reacts with the alkaline chemicals that are in the concrete because it'll fizz up. It'll actually fizz up when you put the acid stain on. And it becomes so acidic that they want you to neutralize it with baking soda to bring it back to proper pH. The pH that you...
It has that wood feel to it too. Like it looks like wood.
Yep. Yeah, do you guys have like a texture for making it look like wood? Yes.